Today, we're diving into a really powerful story from Genesis 13. It's one of those timeless tales, you know? It's all about two very different paths, two huge choices, and the two completely different destinies that came from them.
Here's a question for you. Can massive success actually cause problems? It sounds kind of weird, right? We usually think of success as the thing that solves our problems, not the thing that creates them. But for two relatives in the ancient world, their incredible wealth became the one thing that was about to tear their family apart.
So, let me introduce you to Abraham and his nephew Lot. They'd been on this journey together and had become unbelievably wealthy. We're talking huge herds of animals, tons of silver and gold. In fact, they were so rich, the land itself just couldn't support both of them. It was a real problem of plenty. And as you can imagine, this started causing some serious friction. Fights were breaking out between their workers, and the tension was just getting thicker and thicker.
Now, usually, in a situation like this, the older, more powerful guy, that's Abraham, would just pull rank and take what he wants. But Abraham does something, well, something pretty radical. He decides to tackle this conflict head-on, with a solution nobody saw coming.
I mean, can you believe how generous this is? Abraham, the patriarch, the elder, basically says, look, our relationship is more important than any of this. I don't want to fight. The whole land is right here. You choose first. He just completely diffuses the whole situation with this incredible act of humility.
What's so amazing about Abraham's approach is that it's a masterclass in conflict resolution that still holds up today. First, he puts family way ahead of money. Second, he shows this unbelievable humility by letting his younger nephew pick first. And third, he actively goes after a peaceful solution instead of just letting things get worse. Okay, so Abraham has made this amazing offer. The ball is now in Lot's court. What's he going to do? This is the moment the whole story pivots on, and the choice Lot makes is going to set the course for the rest of his life. So Lot looks around, and his decision is based completely on what he can see with his own two eyes. He sees this lush, green, well-watered valley, so beautiful he thinks it looks like the Garden of Eden. It's a purely practical choice, right? An economic decision. He sees what looks like the best deal, and he takes it for himself.
And boom! This choice has an instant consequence. It leads him to set up his camp near Sodom, a place the Bible makes a point of telling us was incredibly wicked. It's not like he moved right in, but it was this gradual drift, a slow move toward a place of total moral corruption, all because he trusted his eyes over everything else.
So Lot has made his choice. What about Abraham? He's left with, well, whatever's left. You might think he got the short end of the stick here, but his story takes a completely different turn. Instead of getting leftovers, he gets a promise.
What a contrast, right? It's night and day. Lot chose one good-looking valley, but God, seeing Abraham's faith and his humility, promises him everything he can see, in every single direction. It's a promise that's so much bigger than what's immediately visible. It's about the future. And what does Abraham do? Does he complain? Nope. He packs up, moves to a place called Hebron. And what's the very first thing he does when he gets there? He builds another altar. He just continues doing what he's always done, worshiping and keeping his focus on his relationship with God. Okay, so we've seen the two choices and what happened right after. Now let's really put them side by side. Let's dig in and see just how different their mindsets really were. On one side, you've got Lot. Everything he did was based on sight. His priority was personal gain. And even though he'd followed Abraham on this divine journey, he never really let go of the world. And in the process, he kind of disrespected his uncle. Then you've got Abraham. He acted in faith, not by sight. He chose peace and relationships over profit. Think about it. He lived in temporary tents, but built permanent altars. That tells you everything about where his true priorities were. It's just a perfect picture of wisdom and humility. But wait, the story doesn't stop there. There's another layer to this, and it's hidden in the names of the places. The actual geography in this story becomes a metaphor for our own spiritual lives. So earlier in the story, Abraham built his first altar in a spot between two towns. The first one is Bethel. Its name literally means house of God. This place represents worship, the connection to the divine, our spiritual center. And the other town, it's called Hai, which means ruin. This place stands for the worldly path, the one focused on stuff that doesn't last and ultimately leads to destruction. And the text says Abraham camped between the house of God and ruin. What a powerful image for where we so often find ourselves, right? Caught between the spiritual and the world. So after he and Lot go their separate ways, after he makes that crucial choice for peace, where does Abraham go?
He goes to Hebron. And guess what Hebron means? Communion or fellowship. He intentionally moves his life toward a place of deeper fellowship with God, away from that tension.
So when you put it all together, the message is crystal clear. Abraham saw the path Lot chose, the path to Sodom with all its fancy stuff and worldly success, and he wanted no part of it. He chose a simpler life, yeah, but it was a life that was all about his communion with God.
And really, that's the question this whole story leaves us with. In a world that's constantly asking us to choose between what we can see and what we believe in, between short-term gain and long-term faith, where are you building your permanent structures? What in your life is just a temporary tent? And what is your permanent altar?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission is always the same. We take a stack of compelling sources, ancient texts, modern research, you name it, and we try to distill them into actionable insights for your life.
And today we are really cracking open a document that's thousands of years old, specifically Genesis chapter 13.
Right, and what's so striking is that you find a story that honestly feels like it was written yesterday.
It really does. It poses a question. What do you do when immense success, when material prosperity actually threatens to destroy your most valuable relationships?
So for anyone unfamiliar, we're looking at two main figures here. Abraham and his nephew Lot. They've just achieved what you might call peak success.
Yeah, they've left Egypt, they're traveling north, and the sources really emphasize that they're absolutely loaded.
Loaded is a good word for it. We're talking gold, silver, massive herds of livestock. But this combined wealth actually created a resource crisis.
And that's our focus for this deep dive. We're analyzing the decision-making model of their split. Who chose, the immediate assets and who prioritized the long-term lasting values.
It's a timeless human dilemma, really.
Exactly. And you see two completely distinct leadership styles emerge that the second resources become scarce. Lot's model is, it's purely transactional. It's focused on the immediate economic opportunity.
And Abraham's.
Abraham's is centered on peace, on humility, and on maintaining that family harmony, even at a personal cost.
So even if you've never picked up this text before, it is, in a way, one of the most powerful case studies in ethical leadership you could ever find.
I think so. I'm really struck by just how quickly that success became a liability for them.
Let's get into the mechanics of that conflict. The text explains that they both became very rich on their journey.
And it specifies, right, immense herds of sheep and goats, cattle, silver, gold. This wasn't just, simple prosperity.
No, this was the kind of explosive growth that completely outstrips your infrastructure.
That's a great way to put it. And what's fascinating here is that the conflict, it wasn't ideological. It was purely logistical, driven by scarcity.
They were camped in a specific region and the land. The grazing land, the water sources. It just wasn't enough.
Not enough to sustain both of these enormous groups at the same time. Think about it like a successful startup that suddenly needs 10 times the server space overnight.
But the infrastructure just isn't there.
Exactly. And this immediately created friction between their teams, the herdsmen working for Abraham and the ones working for Lot.
So the conflict starts at the operational level.
Right. The sources describe intense contention and disputes. It's the classic organizational struggle, really. Staff fighting over parking spots, or in this case, fighting over who gets access to the only clean water.
And it's all driven by the boss's huge combined success.
Yeah, and crucially, the land wasn't empty. This is a key detail.
The narrative reminds us that the local population, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, they were already living there.
So it wasn't just two families needing to split an empty pie. It was a high-stakes competition where every water hole, every patch of grass was already contested.
That adds this whole other layer of external pressure. It's like a corporate merger that's already drawing hostile attention from competitors.
Exactly. If Abraham and Lot let their internal strife continue, they become vulnerable to everyone else around them.
So their success amplified this internal family conflict.
A conflict between, as the text emphasizes, close relatives. This moment demanded, decisive ethical leadership.
Someone had to make a choice.
Yes. Who was willing to make the sacrifice required to put the relationship ahead of controlling the resources?
And that really is the pivot point. We see Abraham step up immediately. He prioritizes that familial piece above everything else.
He doesn't wait. He doesn't let it fester. He actively intervenes to stop it from escalating.
And he says something that I find just so compelling as a leadership principle. He tells Lot, do not allow this conflict to stand between us. Yeah. After all, we are close relatives.
It's an extraordinary statement of values-based leadership. And it shows, I mean, just massive humility and deference.
Because he's the senior figure here, right?
Yeah.
He's the mentor, the elder.
Absolutely. And despite all that, he puts Lot in the driver's seat. He gives him the unilateral choice of the entire region just to avoid a permanent rift.
He basically says, you pick first. You take the best, most lucrative option, and I'll take whatever is left.
Yeah. But wait, doesn't it seem, a little risky? I mean, we're trained to think that leaders have to assert authority, especially when resources are tight.
That's a great question. Why wouldn't Abraham, as the elder, just draw a line in the sand and say, I'm in charge, I get the best land?
He could have. And had he done that, he might have solved the immediate land problem. But he would have created this lasting bitter fissure in the family.
So he was playing the long game.
It seems so. The sources suggest Abraham understood that peace and family connection were assets that had sort of an exponential long-term value.
Far greater than the profit margin on the best grazing land.
Exactly. And the historical context here is interesting. Abraham chose to set aside his age-based authority, which went against the societal expectation that, the younger person defers to the elder.
He chose humility.
He chose humility because he valued unity more than his status. He chose to absorb the cost of the division himself for the sake of peace.
So he's modeling that true leadership sometimes means sacrificing a personal advantage to preserve a higher communal good.
That's a really challenging idea in our hyper-competitive world.
It is. He secured the priceless asset, the relationship, before he secured the physical assets.
But sadly, his nephew Lot, well, he chose to overlook that profound gesture when it came time for him to pick his land.
Which brings us right to Lot's choice, the choice driven by that immediate economic temptation.
Yeah.
He's offered the entire region. How does he respond?
The sources say that Lot looked intently. You can almost picture him doing a thorough cost-benefit analysis.
Scanning the horizon.
Yes. And he sees the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley. He chooses this specific region because it had an abundance of water.
The most valuable resource.
The most valuable resource. He even compares it to the Garden of the Lord, or the incredibly prosperous cultivated lands of Egypt. It was a choice based on guaranteed economic success.
He looked at the balance sheet and saw maximum immediate ROI.
Exactly right. And this brings us to a really key finding from our analysis, which critiques Lot's priorities.
Okay.
Lot's error is described metaphorically. It says he lifted his eyes, but not enough.
Lifted his eyes, but not enough. What does that mean?
Well, he looked high enough to see the lush valley, right? The guaranteed irrigation, the economic potential. But he didn't look high enough to see the non-material priorities.
So things like family, stability.
Exactly. He should have been looking for maybe proximity to his mentor, Abraham, or for a healthy moral environment for his family. But instead, he only looked at the level of economic prosperity that Sodom's proximity would bring.
He didn't prioritize his relative, and he didn't prioritize values.
That distinction, lifting your eyes, but only just high enough for immediate profit, is so relevant today.
It's like taking the highest paying job at a company you know has a toxic, corrupt culture.
That is the perfect analogy. You're prioritizing that immediate financial reward over your long-term moral or even mental well-being.
And the geographic consequence of Lot's decision is pretty stark.
It is. He chose the fertile valley, he moved his tents, and he settled near Sodom, right among the cities of the plain. It was the choice for convenience and guaranteed riches.
But it came with a massive moral caveat.
A huge one. Tell us about that caveat. The sources make it really clear that while Lot was chasing the best pasture, he was also moving into the worst neighborhood.
Absolutely. The inhabitants of that region, specifically Sodom, were explicitly described as being extremely perverse.
So he chose to move his entire family, his entire enterprise, directly into a zone of moral jeopardy.
Purely for the economic edge.
It's a staggering trade-off. You see Abraham sacrificing land for peace, and Lot sacrificing peace and safety for land.
Yeah. And while the narrative does note later that Lot was eventually rescued because he was a righteous man, tormented by the immorality he saw,
the initial calculation was still deeply flawed. That choice, based purely on economics, placed his family in crisis. And the analysis explicitly notes that this mistake would cost him his family later.
Wow.
He embraced the economic promise of the world, but he just failed to set a moral boundary against its temptations.
So, one man chooses peace and humility, sacrificing immediate gain. The other chooses the most luxurious opportunity, seemingly regardless of the consequences. And we see the result almost immediately after Lot leaves.
This is the critical turning point. The moment Abraham fulfills his ethical obligation, accepts the lesser land, he is rewarded directly with this profound promise.
From God.
Yes, God instructs him to look as far as you can see in all directions, north, south, east, west. The scope of it is just massive.
And this promise is immediate, it's expansive, and it comes right after Abraham's act of deference.
It's almost as if the universe rewarded the quality of the decision, not the size of the initial asset he held.
That's a powerful idea.
And the promise was twofold and permanent, which is in sharp contrast to the temporary fertile land Lot chose.
What were the two parts?
First, the land itself, which was guaranteed to him and his descendants as a possession permanent. And second, descendants who would be impossible to count, like the dust of the earth.
So the contrast couldn't be clearer. Lot gets great grass now.
And Abraham gets a promise that spans eternity and generation after generation. This reward is directly linked to his attitude.
His humility and love for his kin.
Right. Sacrificing that immediate claim on the land for peace led directly to this vision of eternal land.
And if you look at Abraham's actions right after this, they speak volumes.
They really do. He moves his camp to Hebron, settles near a place called the Oaks of Mamre. But the essential detail is what he does immediately.
Builds another altar.
Another altar to his higher purpose, which contrasts so dramatically with Lot's move. Lot was setting up his tents to leverage the infrastructure and sophistication of the cities.
Abraham didn't try to blend into a city or build a permanent settlement. He stayed mobile, and he stayed focused on devotion.
And that highlights another key finding from the sources. Abraham's custom was living in temporary tents and prioritizing the building of altars.
So his choices showed he valued his relationship with his higher purpose over settled comfort or worldly sophistication.
Exactly. Unlike the material abundance Sodom offered, he was choosing, really, an intentional simplicity, even while he was still an incredibly wealthy man.
Let's circle back to the geographical symbolism because our sources highlight some fascinating place names. Before the split, the narrative placed Abraham camping between two places, Bethel and Ai.
And that seems highly intentional. Bethel means house of God. Ai means ruin, so he was literally conducting his entire successful but crisis-ridden enterprise while being situated physically and symbolically between the ultimate destination, the house of God, and the ultimate consequence, ruin.
It's a symbol for the fundamental human condition, then. We're always sort of camped temporarily in the space of tension, with our choices leading either toward aspiration or decay.
That's it, exactly. It suggests this powerful, universal idea. Humanity is in an intermediate stage. We're camping temporarily in this world directed toward ruin, awaiting the world to come, which is symbolized by the house of God.
And the significance of Abraham's final destination, Hebron, just cements his choice.
Yes, Hebron means communion.
So Abraham moved to a place named Communion where he builds altars and sets himself up for this eternal connection.
He preferred that communion over the urban sophistication and, the quick abundance that Sodom offered.
So this deep dive really provides us with a clear binary choice that we all face. Lot chose material abundance, looked only at the economic opportunity, and moved toward a place of moral ruin.
While Abraham chose peace and humility, received a promise of eternal land and countless descendants, and moved toward a place named communion.
The choice is always there. The immediate lucrative temptation versus the long-term lasting reward.
And that really is the core discovery here. The ethical choice prioritizing family peace and spiritual values over a material claim. It immediately preceded an immense permanent promise for Abraham.
Meanwhile, Lot's choice of temporary wealth and comfort led him straight towards moral jeopardy and eventual loss.
Which raises an important question for all of us about, I think, radical prioritization. The sources suggest a profound principle.
Go on.
That anyone who willingly steps away from assets, be it a house or siblings or mother or father or children or goods, for a higher enduring purpose will receive 100 times more in this life.
Along with, as the text says, persecution.
Right, along with persecution, but also the promise of eternal life in the world to come. It's an ancient formula that insists the material cost of a good decision is always outweighed by the enduring reward.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening right now? When you're faced with that choice between quick financial gain and deep relational or moral peace, are you maybe committing the error of Lot?
Are you lifting your eyes just high enough to see the immediate economic gain, the most fertile valley?
Or are you looking higher for a promise that is much more ample, beautiful, and enduring than any temporary wealth?
That's the choice this ancient narrative demands we consider today. Where are you pitching your tents, near ruin or near communion?